My name's Jeff Turner, and I've made over $1.5 million printing counterfeit cash, known as the Picasso of counterfeiting. I grew up in a suburb of Tampa called Palm Harbor. You know, I played t-ball and baseball, had a lot of friends, was pretty normal American dream type childhood, really. I started high school, and I took a whole lot of art classes, like art, 2D, 3D, all the painting, drawing, sculpting stuff. At about 15 or 16 years old, I started printing fake IDs just to buy beer. Just being able to fudge reality with a printer, I mean, it made you feel like, you know, sky's the limit. A few years later, I ended up reading a book, and it's about a counterfeiter up in Chicago who was printing $100 bills. He kind of broke down replicating the features that people look for to distinguish whether the bills are real or not. That was the light bulb moment. I thought that I'd be stupid not to try printing $100 bills. But then I met a girl named Jessica, and we get married and start a family. Finding out I'm having a baby, it's almost like a frantic feeling, you know, like scrambling to make money. And at this point, I had just lost my job, and I didn't have money to even pay the rent. Getting a new job, it's like you have to apply at all these places and wait for an interview, and then even if they do hire you, you get paid in a month. That wasn't gonna work. I was desperate, and I didn't have much of a choice. Counterfeiting seemed to make the most sense. But also, I was a husband and a father, and I couldn't risk getting caught or going to jail. I knew I needed to make bills that were flawless. I just literally 12 hours a day, every day, focused on making the highest quality bill that I could. I knew I needed 2 sheets of paper that was thin enough to glue together and opaque enough to show the strip and the watermark when you held it up to the light, but not through the face of the bill. I was obsessive over it. Like, my wife would get frustrated with me because I was so obsessive. I finally got the bills looking good. I felt completely confident with how they looked. So I decided to just break the bills myself. Breaking bills is basically laundering the counterfeit money into legitimate money. Just walk into a store and buy something with the fake money and get the change. The first store I went into, I was super nervous. I walked into the dining room at like 11:45, and they were closing up. And I ordered a couple tacos, gave her the bill, and she just held it up real quick and put it in the drawer. And it went as perfect as you could imagine. And when it went so smoothly, it was just kind of a shock. Like, I almost was expecting to just like bolt out the door or something. But after that first time I broke it, I just tried it again and tried it again. And then after about 10 times without any issue, it just seemed like it was too easy. Every day I printed at least $1,000 to $2,000. There was definitely a thrill of getting away with something. I felt confident in spending them just about anywhere, but you still don't know how some cashier who handles money all day, every day is gonna react to it. One time I went into a store, and I didn't know their process. It was the first time I went there. And I went to a register and handed them the bill, and he like put it in a bill validator machine. It blinked red, and he did it again, and it blinked red. At that point, I was like super nervous. So when he said, "Just 1 second, I gotta call a manager over here," like, oh shit, should I just run out the door? My heart was pumping, but I knew I can't just run out of the store. It's guaranteed you look guilty, and they're left with the evidence. You know, they've got the counterfeit $100 bill, and you're on camera running out of the store. So I just, you know, stood there. When the manager arrived, she put it in the bill validator machine a few times, and it blinked red every time. Now I know I'm screwed. And then she said, oh, it must just be an old bill, or the machine's messing up or something, and she accepted it anyway, so. I got pretty lucky. I never went to that place again after that. At that point, our lease was up and we started living at hotels, and I just went all the way in with this. Like, I treated it like a business, like a job, like move around from city to city, hit up as many stores as I could, as fast as I could, and then leave. The stuff I was buying meant nothing to me. The whole point was to get enough real money to cover my living expenses and then, you know, have a few $100 at the end of the night. Living at hotels, eating out, all this was pretty expensive. So then I kind of had to scale the operation, and that's when I really started printing more like, you know, 4,000 or 5,000 a day. Me and my wife would take trips whenever we wanted, you know, and most of it was to break bills. It wasn't so much vacationing. Going from city to city, I was probably working a good 12 to 14 hours a day. Throughout my time living at hotels, I ended up meeting lots of different criminal organizations that would buy bills from me. Between what I was selling to them and what I was breaking at stores myself, I was probably making about $50,000 a week. It's easy money, and the thrill of it is just super addicting. And we were able to live very comfortably. We went on trips, you know, all the time, not only for fun, but also to make more money. You know, lots of jewelry, designer bags, designer clothes, stuff like that. Good Christmases for the kids and out, you know, out to dinners all the time. It was good to not have to worry about money. And, you know, my wife and I had a plan. We were gonna move up to Cleveland, Ohio and buy a house and kind of just sell wholesale, like in real bulk, and begin only dealing with one person, a drug dealer named E. So I heard through the grapevine that E might have been arrested up in Cleveland. I didn't know if he had my bills on him or not, or if he was talking to the police about me. One day, about 6 hours into printing, E calls me. I know when E calls me that he's been arrested, but he doesn't know that I know. So we talk for a minute and I keep it completely vague. I try not to admit anything on the phone. We don't really discuss much, but we plan to meet the next day. I don't have any intention on actually meeting him, but I kind of just want to print this money and get out of town. So I tell him, like, yeah, we'll meet up tomorrow. The next day, my wife decides to go shopping. About 20 minutes later, I hear a knock on the door. I assume it's my wife, maybe forgetting something and coming back, but as paranoid as I am, I always look through the peephole. And when I looked through the peephole, it was just solid black. I knew someone's thumb was over that peephole, which means whoever was on the other side of that door didn't want to be seen. No one knew where I was at this hotel room, like no one. So I knew I was either going to be arrested that day or get killed. Then I started hearing some guy say, "Yo, Jay, open up, yo, Jay." But that's when I looked through the window and saw just like the shoulder of somebody like trying to hide behind the wall, but I saw just like the Knoxville Sheriff's patch on his arm. So then I was like, fuck. At that point, I knew that the room was gonna be raided. I had 3 printers running. I had counterfeit bills laid out all over the bed, in the bathroom, drying, hanging up, everywhere. I looked over at the door and bam! They start hitting it with the battering ram. Boom, boom, boom. It made my heart drop. As soon as I knew that they were actually coming in, you know, I scrambled to try to get rid of the evidence. I grabbed all the counterfeit money and threw it in the toilet and flushed it. The first pile of money in the toilet went down. I threw another batch in and went to flush the toilet, and it just sat there and the toilet was out of water. They were still hitting the door, boom, boom, boom. And I just knew I was done. So I basically just lost hope. And I went in there, sat on the bed and lit a cigarette and just waited for them to kick the door in. When they finally busted the door in, it was the Knoxville Sheriff's Secret Service, Drug Task Force, Organized Crime Unit, all rushed in my room. I was charged with conspiracy to counterfeit U.S. obligations. I was facing up to 20 years in federal prison. I knew at that point that, like, the jig was up. I was caught red-handed. The Secret Service said that I became known as the Picasso of counterfeiting. the bills I was producing were the best they've seen in over 25 years. The Secret Service ended up offering me a deal. If I pleaded guilty, they wouldn't charge my wife with anything. And I made a video showing them exactly how I made the bills. So that's why I got sentenced to 10 months. The concept of money is extremely valuable and important, but currency, like Federal Reserve notes, are just paper. It's just a piece of paper. But it can sure get you in a lot of trouble if you mess around with it.